8-part series on getting to know the Bible better, specifically to help you with your own understanding of the Bible, but also to help you explain it to others. Many of you have people in your life that might depend upon you a little bit, that might have questions about this. You might have children or grandchildren or a spouse or friend who comes to you sometimes and asks you questions about the Bible, and they say, well, you go to church, you're supposed to know all this stuff. And so this is an effort to really dig into it in 8 different parts across Sundays and Wednesdays. And on Sunday, we talked about what is the Bible, which is really about the origin, where we got the Bible from, what is it, this collection of books, and how did we decide upon all that. And so we kind of dug into that a little bit on Sunday, and the sermon for that is posted online, so if you missed it, you can go to the church website and watch that there. And then the great thing about watching online is that you can fast forward through the dull parts. So then tonight we're jumping into the second part, which is what's the overall message of the Bible? It's as a book with all those different individual books inside of it. It can be a little bit daunting to think about, trying to understand. And you get these passages and bits and pieces. But there's some recurring themes and there's some recurring questions that are handled throughout the Bible. And for me, personally, I found that when some of these ideas were presented to me in seminary, I thought, this makes it a lot easier. That when I go to a passage, I've got some kind of background ideas, some basic questions or basic thoughts, recurring themes, that if I keep them in mind, it can kind of help me figure out what are they talking about here. So I just wanted to share some of those with you. And it's worked a little bit for me, and maybe it'll work for you, and if it doesn't, then hey, you had good soup tonight, and dessert. So on the sheet that you have, as it was first presented to me, the Bible's overall message is actually a series of questions that are carried throughout. And it was presented to me as the 6 floodlights of the faith. 3 things that the Bible has an answer for right away. And that all the voices throughout the Bible seem to agree on the first 3 questions. And the second 3, the people of God wrestle with through the whole book. Through the whole Bible, from Old Testament through New Testament. And those questions are, the first one, how many gods? There's one. That's an easy one. But that is affirmed over and over again. And in the culture of the Old Testament, this was quite a new and radical concept. But to this day, even though we do have some world religions that believe in multiple gods, basically the idea that there is but one God is not that radical anymore. But if we really take it to heart, there is only one God. And in your life, there can only be one God. It says something more about the focus of our lives and what we do with our lives, to acknowledge that there is but one God. Another thing that they agree on is, where is the one God? With the chosen people. And we like to think of God as everywhere. But the Bible seems to affirm over and over again, God is with the chosen people. He tells that to the people of Israel in the beginning, I will be with you. And as we go through, and as Jesus expands the message, to whoever he expands the message to, again the message comes across, I'll be with you. I'll be with you. That is where God is. God is with the chosen people. How do we know all this? How do we know these things, that there is one God and that God is with the chosen people? From the law, the Torah, all that stuff that we sometimes think of as just the big rule set at the beginning of our Bible is what establishes the beliefs that ripple throughout the rest of the Bible. And they're trying to deal with the things that are affirmed in that beginning of the Bible. So we know all these things, first of all, from the law. We have the law. The law is a sign that God is with us. Why would God give us the law if he wasn't going to be with us? It just seems something they just take for granted there as a done deal. Then you get into the things that are debated about for the rest of the Bible. How do chosen people relate to others? There's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of back and forth. There's guidance from God, but you can see people still wrestling with it. How do we deal with these others? What about those others? Should we stay away from them? Should we invite them in? What happens if one of those people come into our camp? What do we do with them? There's a lot of questions about this. It's very simple when you know there's one God and that God is with you and God is giving you the law. Fine. But then what happens when those other people show up? And that's dealt with throughout the Old Testament, throughout the prophets, and then when you get into Jesus, and Jesus starts opening up the door a little wider, and we find out that God's got a plan to expand this even further. But how do we relate to them? The next one is, what is the law? It's not so simple, just, well, there it is, there's the set of rules we got there in the beginning. Started with 10, got expanded by several hundred more, but what is the law? What is this set of rules that we've been given? And what do they mean? And how should we adhere to it? And when Jesus comes and reinterprets the laws for the people, they're not quite ready to hear it that way. They were really getting locked into that it was a set of restrictions as opposed to something that would ultimately set them free. They were getting too tightly wound around the words and forgetting the overall message, which is one of love and mercy and grace. So there's a struggle with what is the law throughout the Bible. And then finally, when will God raise His chosen people? In the early stages of the Bible, you're talking about when is He going to get us out of Egypt? Then when is He going to get us out of this wilderness and into the Promised Land? Then after they lose the Promised Land, when are we going to get out of exile and get back to the Promised Land again? And then when they're under the thumb of the Romans, when will the chosen people be lifted up again? Because we're getting oppressed here. And then through the letters of Paul, they're still getting oppressed. When is that going to happen? This is a question which gets asked over and over again through the Scriptures. And when you realize that these 6 questions are what the people of God are wrestling with throughout the Scriptures, then you understand a little bit more about, well, why did they bother to write this? Why are they writing this? Well, because they're trying to figure out what's the law and how do we relate to others and when are we going to get out of this mess? Those are the things that they're still dealing with there. Now, beyond these questions, there's a set of kind of recurring themes that keeps coming up. And the recurring themes are as much revealed in the Old Testament as they are in the New Testament. Those recurring themes are on your handout as well. First of all, that God alone is in charge and worthy of our praise. This God can do it all. This is the only God, and this God is worthy of our praise. That guides a lot of the things that are revealed in the Scriptures. Then, God instructs us so that we can participate in the good life. God doesn't instruct us just to see if we can navigate the gauntlet of rules that He set up. This isn't like like an ancient times version of that TV show Wipeout, where God's just waiting for some giant red ball to come along and knock you off into the waters below. It's actually a set of instructions that are meant to help you. And it may feel painful as you go through the process. It may be very difficult to follow these instructions, but these instructions were given along the way to guide the people into a better life, into the good life. Now, the good life may not always seem like a really good life right at the moment, because it might involve some sacrifice. But it's a fulfilling life. It's a life full of goodness. The next thing that keeps coming up is that God loves us and shows that love most clearly in giving salvation by grace. God loves us. You've got to get that out of all this. But the next part is that it's shown most clearly by giving us salvation by grace. Grace is getting stuff that you don't deserve. And if God showed His love most clearly by giving us salvation, by us ranking high enough on the I haven't sinned too much scale, that wouldn't seem like such an amazing love that's being shared. But by grace, it's given to us. That's affirmed over and over again and fleshed out and talked about. And what does this mean? And so how do we live with that? Even back in the Old Testament, it was by grace. It started off as, there's 2 ways that people think about getting salvation. One is by works, which is what you do, and one is by grace, which is by gift of God. We had works, but it only lasted for as long as the garden there. Here's the works that you have to do. Not from that tree. Don't eat from that tree. There was one rule, you do that. By that work, you maintain salvation. You maintain goodness here. Well, they couldn't do it. So God switched into a mode of grace. And from that moment on, it's grace. And you go, but wait a minute, Robert, I remember reading all these things in the Bible about there's all these rules I have to follow. And if I don't follow these rules, then I'll get punished in this way, and I have to sacrifice this animal and all that. But even the whole sacrificial system is an act of grace. Because the fact that you did wrong to someone else, how is that balanced by killing a cow? I mean, how does that work? Or, that by making these sacrifices, that somehow that balances it out. At that time, with that culture, with the way those people were, and the backgrounds they were coming out of, they needed a system like this. They understood the idea of sacrifice. And so he said, okay, I'll work with that. And we'll do this but it's by grace, because really the forgiveness of your sins still comes down to a matter of me accepting slaughtering that animal for the sake of what you did to your brother or sister. So it's all grace, really. And then later, we were ready for the next stage. We were ready for the Jesus upgrade, where there would be one sacrifice, and that would atone for all of it. Then it goes, another theme that keeps coming up is God graciously forgives us so that we can be in relationship with God. God forgives us. God gives us this grace. For what purpose? So that we can be in relationship with God. There's just a basic kind of principle at work in the cosmos, which I don't know that we talk about much, but there's this basic idea that was upheld for centuries, that holy cannot be with unholy. Clean cannot be with unclean. And so if God is the purest and the cleanest and the holiest, then we need to be purified, made clean, in order to have relationship with God. We don't talk like that anymore, but it still guides our faith. This amazing God, we need something to bridge that gap in our relationship, because we constantly rebel. We constantly use our pride and think we know better. And so something needs to bring us into relationship. And that forgiveness does that for us. God wiping it all away, covering us with the righteousness of Christ, says, I don't see all that. I see the perfection of Christ upon you. And so we can be in relationship with one another. That's an important theme that they really concern themselves a lot with. I mean, a lot of the Old Testament is about whether you're clean or you're unclean. And when Jesus shows up on the scene, he starts hanging out with lepers, okay? Starts hanging out with people who have different types of deformities or handicaps, or starts hanging out with people who have less than desirable occupations, let's just say, then suddenly we see that all that concern over clean and unclean got lost. The process got lost, and the understanding that there's forgiveness that can cover all of this. And Christ came to reveal that. The last thing that keeps coming up in the Bible across the Old and New Testament is that God wants us to express our love and gratitude by loving others, particularly the weak. That the way that we're supposed to respond to this is not so much about performing sacrifices to God, but what's pulled out through the Scriptures, through the prophets, and certainly Jesus really nails it home, is that God prefers mercy over sacrifice. That God really is concerned about how we treat one another, which is a weird thing back then. Gods that people worshiped back then, when they thought about what a God would desire, it was all about sacrificing things to the God, giving things to the God. And then along comes this notion of a God who actually cares what you do to you. And that if you want to show God how much you love God, if you want to show God how grateful you are for being forgiven, then let's see you well up some forgiveness for this person over here. Or let's see you love this person over here the way I loved you. That's in the Old Testament too, folks. And it's certainly in Jesus' words. Love one another as I've loved you. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those I mean, that's how we show our love and gratitude. When we hold that back, we're holding back an offering to God. The thing that's really interesting is that God really seems to like the underdog. God likes the weak. He picked this ragtag bunch of Israelites to be the chosen people. He picked the ornery brother of Jacob and Esau. He picked kind of the scrawny one of Joseph out of his brothers to be used in that end story in Genesis, in feeding all those people. He didn't seem to always pick the obvious. And there's very big concern throughout the prophets and in Jesus' time as well with how are you treating the poor? How are you treating the orphans, the widows? Because if you're a widow, if you're an orphan, you are powerless in this society. The society that they were in. And so it was a big concern as to how would we care for these folks. And the scriptures over and over again say, hey, that's our job. That's our job. It's part of what we're called to do. With these recurring themes and these questions, you can run a passage over these things, and I think sometimes it can pull out a little bit of what the point was of the passage, because these are the things that the Bible is concerned about. The Bible is really a book about the community's salvation. It's not a book about your salvation. The Bible is so much more concerned about the sake of the community. When one person sins, it's the effect that it has on the community that causes them to place them outside the encampment in those Old Testament readings, and makes them go through a ritual of repentance before and cleansing rituals before they can come back in. It's over concern over the community, and that when you fall short of in that relationship with God, you're hurting your community. The Bible is not very much concerned with you accepting Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior. It's concerned with getting you to accept Jesus as this world's Lord and Savior. So these are the big themes, and these are the big questions, and the things you can kind of muddle over your mind as you go through the Bible and read through the Bible. The purpose of this Bible is to tell us about God and ourselves in relation to God. That's why the following two questions are always appropriate to ask when reading a Bible passage, and that's where these two are at the bottom of your handout. What does this passage say about God? What does this passage say about human beings in relation to God? You can go to just about any Bible passage and put those two questions and apply it to that Bible passage, and you're probably going to be on the right path to figure out what this is about. That's why I wrote the Bible, so that people would know about God, and they'd know about how they're connected to this God, how they're in relationship with this God. So, any questions about, that's a woo, right on through a bunch of things there, but any questions about any of these things that I've kind of driven us through here? Or thoughts? It's amazing that when you have a teacher who just is so clear, or otherwise so utterly confusing that you dare not ask a question because it was just that way. Well, flip it on over, and I wanted to share something with you, is that there are certain Bible passages that really connect with folks. And so I just kind of went through the Bible and picked out the ones that really do it for me. The ones that if you press me on a particular issue of faith, odds are I'm going to go to one of these scriptures. If not out loud with you in my mind, to remind me of who God is and who I am in relationship to God. And so these passages here that span from Genesis on through the New Testament, these are ones that really work for me. And I'll bet that there are some passages that would be on your list if you you are making a list like this. So I'd like to have just a little time of table talk with you all. And I just want you to take some time with these passages that you have. There's a lot to choose from here, okay? And what I'd like you to do is just to, at your table, pick out the one that speaks the most to you. Maybe really resonates with you as well. And think about those two questions. If you want to pull in some of the things about the recurring themes or these different questions that are carried through the Bible in your discussion, that would be great. But just start off with the two simple questions, which is, what do you think this says about God? And what do you think this says about human beings in relationship to God? And just pick out whichever one sticks out to you and talk about it with your buddies at your table. And we're just going to take about 5 minutes or so to do that. So go ahead and jump on in and look at those passages and pick out the ones and think about those two questions.